So,
Be quiet
Okay,
and
chill.
listen to Dad.
so we're having an extra blabby children today, but
No, Paul.
all right. So if you've been with us all along, we've been working through the book of Daniel. This is our 10th lesson on Daniel. If you're just joining us, we just sang a barbershop quartet version of the songs Heaven Joy Awaits. It is by the Gaither Vocal Band. If it's not possible for you to listen to the song on where you're following us, I recommend you go ahead and look the song up somewhere. The Gaither Vocal Band, Heaven's Joy Awaits. I am Andy Knopka. This is our Monday night church service. We're here in the house with our guests and children. Yeah, and at any time, you've been warned we could have a Paul. Yeah, Paul, that's hilarious. So, all right.
No, do full screen.
Okay.
Don't we? Would I like full screen? We just need 2 more parts and then we'll be done with Daniel.
Almost.
Yeah.
So,
2 more parts, right?
so as we've been reading through Psalm 119, the longest chapter in the Bible, we come to a section based on the Hebrew letter Teth. And this is grace.
Oh, sorry. You have
Delicate.
Speak up.
delicate.
No, dealt.
What?
That word is dealt,
Oh.
not delicate.
You have dealt well with your servant. O Lord, according to your will.
Word. You have dealt well with your servant, O Lord, according to your word. Paul.
Okay. Teach me good judgment and knowledge. For I believe in your commandments.
Okay, go sit down, Paul.
I was just helping Paul.
Yes. Okay, okay now.
Before I was afflicted,
Afflicted.
okay, I went astray, but now I keep your word. Whoa!
You are good and do good. Teach me your statutes. The insolent smear me with lies, but with my whole heart I keep your precepts.
Their heart is unfeeling like fat, but I delight in your law. It is good for me that I was afflicted. Yeah, afflicted. That I might learn your statutes.
Statutes.
Oh.
The law of your mouth is better to me than thousands of gold and silver pieces. So we are going to be eventually in the middle of a phone call. No, in the middle of Daniel chapter 11.
Sweetie.
But before we get going, this coming up is one of the most specific prophecies in the entire Bible found here. Daniel had a lot of trouble after he saw the vision of the 70 weeks before this in chapter 9, and last week in chapter 10, Daniel was really worried about what was coming. So everything that Daniel worried about in chapter 10 is addressed here. There's a thing on the floor over there. Go grab something.
Richard, to boost
So-
in your spot, just like last week.
No, you're going to dump my coffee, please. Go sit down, Paul.
You're not stealing my spot.
Look at Richard. The prophecies that we find here are so specific that the scholars contend that this is history
Hi, Judge.
written afterward and not prophecy. Paul, you need to come over here and sit down, please. Okay.
But try to steal your seat this time.
A lot of details are given where it talks about events that have happened throughout history that we know have come true because we're reading this 2,500 years after it was written. But at the time that Daniel wrote this, it was all before it was set to come true. So, if you're not here with us and you have your Bible, please turn to Daniel chapter 11, verses 1 through 4. I'm not getting very far because everybody keeps talking. I'm trying to run a church service here.
Daniel 11. And as for me, in the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him. And now I will show you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings shall arise in Persia, and a 4th shall be far richer than all of them. And when he has become strong through his riches, he shall stir up all against the kingdom of Greece. Then the mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do as he wills. And as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not to his posterity, nor according to the authority with which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to others besides these.
So, what would happen in the Bible is, as God would raise up a prophet that would tell us about things that were to come, the person that was a prophet would give us a small, testable prophecy that the people in the time that heard it would be able to judge if it came to pass or not. If found unreliable, though, the people would put the unreliable prophet to death by stoning. So there weren't false prophets running around. So the prophecies you read in the Bible are by tested prophets who have been backed up and they know that their word is coming from God. Because people running around giving false prophecies risked death by stoning. The angel from the last chapter that was telling us and getting us ready for chapter 11, in chapter 10, the angel from last chapter, this whole time, has been strengthening Darius the Mede, who had a very short reign. He was the king from the Daniel and the Lion's Den. 3 more kings shall arise in Persia, and a 4th shall be richer than all of them. So, this is a small, testable prophecy. It took a while before it came to pass, and Daniel was already a reliable prophet at the time, but 3 more kings are coming. So, the king at the time of this prophecy was Cyrus the Great. He ruled in BC from 559 to 530. After him came his son, Cambyses II. After Cambyses came a king Bardia, but he only ruled for a few months. He was not king for very long. He was possibly a false king, a pretender. After Bardia came a king, Darius the Great, or Darius the Great. So these are the 3 kings that Daniel just gave a prophecy about. It says, after these 3 kings, a 4th king shall come that shall be richer than all of them, and that is King Xerxes. He was strong through his riches, and he antagonizes Greece. So here, here we have a scene from a palace in Persia where
No.
King Xerxes is being crowned by King Darius. If we look up above, we see the Ahura Mazda that we talked about, where the Persians were Zoroastrians, and this was the symbol. So Xerxes being crowned by Darius. Xerxes is the rich king that starts up the problems with the Greeks. Dog, this is a bad time. Why couldn't you have done that a half an hour ago? Come back down here. Oops.
What did you just do?
All right. All right. So Daniel was prophesying at the time of Cyrus in the 550s BC. So this is several decades later when Xerxes comes to power. He gets the Greeks involved. Now the next piece of prophecy the scripture talks about a mighty king, and that's Alexander the Great, and he was from Greece or Macedonia. He was 150 years after Xerxes. But it says, as soon as he is arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the four winds of heaven. And this happened. Alexander the Great came through, he took over everything, partied hard, and died. We've talked about him before in the past. There were two kings that took over pieces of his empire. Ptolemy, that took over in Egypt, and Seleucid, who took over in Syria. The Bible focuses on these two pieces of Alexander's kingdom, but the question I have is why? Well, the Seleucids here are most of what the Persian Empire was, and the Ptolemies here in Egypt, right in between, in this piece right above Nabatea, is Israel. So the reason why the Bible focuses on the Seleucids and the Ptolemies is that they're the closest kingdoms to Israel. And remember, in the Old Testament, we are the story of the Hebrew people. So when it talks about these kings, it's talking about the ones that directly influence Israel. The two other kingdoms were Pergamon, which was Asia Minor, where modern-day Turkey is, and Macedonia, which is Greece. They're not as relevant. The Bible doesn't focus on them because those other two kingdoms influence Israel. They're right there. So the Bible goes on to say, his kingdom divided toward the four winds of heaven, but not to his posterity. So Alexander didn't leave any heirs. His children were killed by his generals, and generals took over. So they weren't part of Alexander's dynasty. There were four random generals. And it also says, not according to the authority with which he ruled. None of the four of these generals ever regained the power that Alexander the Great had. So when the Bible talks about, right here in the beginning of chapter 11, it's giving us a summary of here comes Alexander the Great. He's going to be divided into four kingdoms, and two of them are going to be very important. So next we're going to go to Daniel chapter 11,
Oh, who is this?
verses 5 and 6.
Now it's time for our favorite reader. Narrator.
Then the king of the south shall be strong, but one of his princes shall be stronger than he, and shall rule, and his authority shall be a great authority. After some years they shall make an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the strength of her arm, and he and his arm shall not endure. But she shall be given up, and her attendants he who fathered her, and he who supported her in those times.
I had those verses read not because they're important to our story, but because they introduce an idea, two things that will be important to us. So from verse 5 all the way to verse 35, there's a large section here of historical events that happened between the time of Daniel to the time that Rome took over. But they aren't really for our purposes. We just need a basic understanding. So, two different kings are introduced. A king of the north and a king of the south. And what happens a lot in Bible prophecy is people read Bible prophecy and they try to make it seem relevant that it could happen right now in our time. So there was a movement in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, because the Soviet Union was powerful, that people read about the king of the north and they went, oh, that must be the Soviet Union. It must be Russia. They're powerful. They're going to come and destroy everything and bring in Bible prophecy. When we looked at the map not that long ago, we see from the map that directly above Israel, to the north of them, that the people in the Bible would have known about was the Seleucid kingdom. It wasn't Russia. And the reason why I don't believe it was Russia is if we take a look at what the Hebrew people would have known as the world. Here's Israel. There's two massive mountain ranges here. The people of Israel wouldn't have known anything above that. Russia's up here, folks. Way up. Sarmatian. So the reason why I don't believe that Bible prophecies are talking about Russia is because the Hebrew people didn't know about them, and the people of the time would not have been able to get there because of the mountains. The king of the north is the Seleucids, modern day Persia, the Middle East, Iran, Iraq, places like that. The king of the south, Ptolemies, which would be Egypt. Both of those places are still relevant today, but not in the way that many people think. So in Daniel, as I mentioned before, 5 through 34, it goes from talking about events that are close to the time of Daniel, that set up what's going to happen, but they're not relevant for our purposes. We're not taking a history course right now. In relation to Jerusalem, Syria and eastern Turkey are directly north, and Egypt is south. And this has been true for most of Israelite history. So when the Bible talks about north of Israel, it's talking about Turkey and Syria. And it's talking about south, it's talking about Egypt, because they're right there. They're close. Now remember how I said that several verses aren't important? In verse 21, it says, "In his place shall arise a contemptible person to whom royal majesty has not been given. He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by flatteries." It's talking about, a few chapters ago, I introduced you to Antiochus Epiphanes. He was the one that the Jews called the madman, and he was the reason why there's the celebration of Hanukkah today. We talked about a terrible... Well, yeah, we celebrate... Well, not we, but the Jewish people celebrate Hanukkah. It has to do with Antiochus Epiphanes and the terrible things that in our time, honey. We're not celebrating Hanukkah today. No, very good. Thank you. Antiochus Epiphanes was a Seleucid king from Syria. He's a preview of the Antichrist. The terrible things that will come are embodied in Antiochus Epiphanes. So we can get an idea of what the Antichrist will be by looking at some of the things that Antiochus did. We're going to go and read a little bit from chapter 11, verse 29.
Oh, Jenny, don't mess things up this time. What do you mean mess things up?
All right. Paul, what time did that tell me to go to? Did it say go to 5:44?
Yeah. Don't mess things up this
time. Paul, At the time appointed, he shall return and come into the south, and shall establish the kingdom of the south.
time.
And at the time appointed, he shall return and come into the south, and establish the kingdom of the south.
5:44.
5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5:44. 5: but it shall not be this time as it was before. For ships of Kittim shall come against him, and he shall be afraid and withdraw, and shall turn back and be enraged and take action against the Holy Covenant. He shall turn back and pay attention to those who forsake the Holy Covenant. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering. And they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. He shall seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant, but the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. And the wise among the people shall make many understand, though for some days they shall stumble by sword and flame, by captivity and plunder. When they stumble, they shall receive a little help. And many shall join themselves to them with flattery, and some of the wise shall stumble, so that they may be refined, purified, and made white until the time of the end, for it still awaits the appointed time.
In the time appointed he shall return. So, in Antiochus, the ruler that shall give us an idea of what the Antichrist is like. In history, the two kingdoms of Seleucid and Ptolemy fought over Israel all the time. Whoever was the dominant power controlled the land of Israel. And at one point in Antiochus' history, he invades the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. But he fails. Now when it says the ships of Kittim, Kittim is the island of Cyprus, which is near halfway between Israel and Greece, but they're helped by the Roman Navy. So the Roman Navy gets involved and helps the people that are fighting Antiochus Epiphanes. We get the expression a line drawn in the sand from the time the Antiochus loses. Now what happened was, there's a Roman general and the army comes through and they have Antiochus Epiphanes completely surrounded, and the general comes up to him, draws a circle around him, and demands, before you leave this circle, I want you to declare your loyalty and pay tribute. And that line in the sand is where we get that expression from. Antiochus then returns to Jerusalem and goes nuts. He went absolutely crazy. If he was nuts before, he was extra nuts now. He made a altar to Zeus in the holy place. He sold off the high priesthood. He sacrificed a pig on the altar inside the temple. Now, pigs were absolute no-nos to the Jews at the time, so sacrificing a pig inside was terrible. Thousands of people were slaughtered, and this is what we call the abomination that makes desolate. And some of the wise shall stumble until the time of the end, for it shall await the appointed time. Verse 35 is important. This is a turning point, because it talks about Antiochus Epiphanes only rules for a short time, the time appointed. But now it shifts to a different thing that we're talking about. It's talking about the future. It's talking about the Antichrist that's coming. And we'll hear from Daniel chapter 11, verse 36.
Verse 36.
Now I have two different versions of the Bible up here. Don't pay attention to this one yet. We're in verse 36.
And the king shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself, and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods. He shall prosper till the indignation is accomplished, for what is decreed shall be done. He shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers, or to the one beloved by women. He shall not pay attention to any other god, for he shall magnify himself above all. He shall honor the God of fortresses instead of these, a God whom his fathers did not know. He shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. He shall deal with the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god. Those who acknowledge him he shall load with honor. He shall make them rulers over many, and shall divide the land for a price. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, but the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall come into countries, and shall overflow and pass through. He shall come into the glorious land, and tens of thousands shall fall, but these shall be delivered out of his hand: Edom and Moab, and the main part of the Ammonites. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall become ruler of the treasures of gold and of silver, and all the precious things of Egypt, when the Libyans and the Cushites shall follow in his train. But news from the east and the north shall alarm him, and he shall go out with great fury to destroy, and devote many to destruction. And he shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, with none to help him.
So, the Antichrist comes, and he proclaims he is more powerful than God Almighty. And this isn't the first person to do this, but for the specific Bible prophecy, the Antichrist can do some amazing things. Some strict churches teach that the Antichrist is a homosexual, and the reason for this is in the Hebrew grammar. The reason why I pulled up the two versions of the Bible was that one of them, in the New King James Version, it says that the Antichrist will not honor women. And what's actually being said in the Hebrew grammar is we think it's talking about Jesus, because it says that the Antichrist is not honored by the one who was honored by women. It's all in the grammar. The Antichrist cares about strong army, conflict, and power. And to gain absolute power, we learned back in Daniel chapter 7, verse 24, that as for the 10 horns, out of his kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings. Now here in Daniel chapter 11, it's talking about the Antichrist coming out and taking out other nations. And back earlier in Daniel, we talked about it. We knew that this was going to happen. These were kings that put him in power and rose against him, and they got taken out. The Antichrist doesn't rule forever, though. Yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. So it only lasts a certain amount of time. And we will now read through the last chapter of the book of Daniel, chapter 12.
Daniel 12. At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has charge of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, every one whose name shall be found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, 2 others stood, one on this bank of the stream, and one on that bank of the stream. And someone said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream, How long shall it be till the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream. He raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and half a time, that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be finished. I heard, but I did not understand. Then I said, O my Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things? He said, Go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined. But the wicked shall act wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand. But those who are wise shall understand. And from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and arrives at 1,335 days. But go your way till the end, and you shall rest, and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days.
All right. So we learn from this chapter that Michael is the angel of the Hebrew people. We talked about how each nation had an angel. Well, the nation of Israel had an angel that had a name, Michael, powerful angel. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never has been since there has been a nation till that time. When we talked about the 70 weeks a couple chapters ago, this right here is the 70th. When it's talking about there shall be a time of trouble, it's the 70th. We're here. Not right now, but when this happens, it's the 70th week. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. God keeps a book of those going to heaven. So anybody who has his name written in there is good. You'll get out of this, you'll be fine. And those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. So the whole purpose for the tribulation, the 70th week, all the terrible things that are going to happen, is to turn people to God away from evil. So the whole reason why all this has to happen is to get people to turn to God. Twice the angel tells Daniel, I need you to shut up the words and seal them. Take what is happening, close it, seal it off so that you don't see it, because so that when it happens we can look back at what you wrote down that's shut off and sealed, and we know that it'll be true. So that's the reason for that. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. So at the time of the tribulation, the 70th week, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Travel and knowledge. There's going to be a lot of travel and a lot of knowledge. Is now starting a time when that's happening? Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot more travel than there was in ancient times. There's a lot more knowledge than there was in ancient times. Am I saying that that means that the end times are now? No, but we're getting close. Daniel says, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. We're getting close.
It is.
So, when he talks about, the angel is asked, how long will the Antichrist rule in power? The angel says, it'll be for a time, times, and half a time. This is the fancy, poetic way of saying 3.5 years. The Antichrist will be in control for 3.5 years. It talks about 1,290 days. It's 3.5 years. So 1,335 days is 3.5 years plus a month and a half. Why? I don't know. Something different happens in 45 days after the Antichrist dies. Don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Because it's shut up and sealed. This is where we seal up our study of Daniel. It's the end.
Oh, Daniel?
Yep, that's the end of the book of Daniel.
So... So now, I wonder what we're going to be working on now.
Oh. Well, I guess you're just going to have to wait and see.
Till next Monday.
Yep. Since it's St. Patty's Day month, I want to do a song by Robin Mark, the Irish artist.
Are we still Veggie Tales?
Yes, yeah, we'll still do a Veggie Tales. But I want to do a song by Robin Mark, the Irishman.
Sorry.
If you have to leave us because of